Future Now Show. Brought to you by the Club of Amsterdam.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And, the invitation from where we create conversations, you and I, constantly goes to the root of collective intelligence, right? That's something that we are passionate about, both of us. And there's so many ways to look at collective intelligence. And we had looked at it from the lens of language. Remember one time you invited me to speak and we spoke about the role of language and collective intelligence. And, that's some years past, and right now I'm looking at this new focus on organizational development and how collective intelligence plays within organizations. And I want to speak about a very specific point around a ground of work that I found and I've been implemented within a company called Unified Field Corporation. And that ground of work is called Deliberately Developmental Organizations, or DDOs. So DDOs come from the premise that everybody has weaknesses and that employees spend most of their time hiding those weaknesses. So it is like if when they arrive to a job, they have two jobs. One is what they do, what they perform in the role or their function. And the other one is to hide their weakness. So what a DDO does is like, no, we're not going to do this here. We're actually not going to call it weakness. We're going to just call it an edge. And we're going to be able to make visible those edges so that you can take responsibility on working with those edges, and we can create a culture of compassion and help and practices that will enable you to flourish. Because if we want collective intelligence, then better you and better me equal better us. And for that, DDOs create a whole body of practices to be able to help individuals evolve in their mental complexity, evolve from a social mind. Like the social mind would be something like, hey, Bob, we're going in this trip. You want to come? Sure. And Bob jumps into the bus and goes to the end of the bus and drives with you, versus a self-authoring mind where Bob will say, yeah, I want to go, but you know what? Can I drive? And then, he drives. They just become an author of their own reality. They become an author of their work, their job, their function, with even more responsibility and clarity and stewardship. And the other one would be self-transforming mind, which is like, you know what? I go, but I have a new map. I know where to go. I want to test this new terrain. Can we do that? So the self-transforming mind is constantly seeing seeing what happens, seeing how the behaviors, the practices, the strategies, the actions, the feedback is what feedback is coming, to be able to constantly evolve the map and the terrain. And so the best leaders, there's been Robert Keegan and Lisa Lasko that have been doing research for decades around how efficient and what good leaders are. And people that are in self-transforming mindsets, in that level of mental complexity, have proven to be incredibly good for organizations, but they're not the most of the population. But you can help people through their development to be able to be addressing and encompassing more and more complexity, which, as we know, is precise for these times, because we are in times of high volatility and uncertainty, where we need to be able to prepare ourselves for high resilience, adaptivity, and to navigate that complexity. We most focus first in ourselves. So in the realm of DDOs, the growth is something that is primordial. So in Unified Field Corporation, when we, and to go into practical terms, it's like in Unified Field, UFC, what we do when we onboard people is we ask them, are you able to take the risk of evolving your own mindset, your own behaviors? And they want their job, right? So they'll say, yes, yes, of course, of course, of course. And, you know, through a series of questions, you're able to determine more or less what is their capacity for that, to stand for that yes, to really come through with that yes. Yet, nothing like when they face their first edge. Then, you know, that's when you go, oh, remember when you say yes? Well, this is the moment. And most of the times they freak out because most of us are accustomed to hide our weaknesses. We are accustomed that it's going to be painful and we're going to be shamed. So one of the first principles in a DDO is that you don't shame people, you don't blame people, you don't chastise people, you don't punish people. What you do is that you create a feedback where it is going to be sometimes hard to hear that feedback, but it's going to be based on the willingness to support you, to move from that edge, but also create the sufficient challenge so that you actually move, you actually grow. And, you know, when we onboard people, I don't promise them a pain-free organization, a pain-free culture, because I can't. The same, I cannot tell that to my kid. You know, I cannot say, child, I promise you a happy life, because I can't guarantee that for no one, and no one can guarantee it for me. So what we do is we say, but I can promise you one thing. I can promise you that that pain is going to be the pain of growth. Just like, or the pain of life, you know, like when you give birth, it's painful, but you give birth to something new, to a beautiful child, and you're gonna grow and flourish, versus drama, which is the constant that happens within organizations that do not focus on their culture or do not focus on the growth of their people, is that then that drama becomes so pervasive, and there's this gaslighting people and bullying people and people that don't grow, especially, you know, those of us that are introverts. Then, you know, we kind of be standing in the back until we're so silent that nobody can see us, and we're not evolving. The same thing, we're not showing up for the company in our full, because we can't show up for the company in our full because we are not seen. So to be able to see people, to be able to learn about people, to be able to help them with their evolution, we must know them. And so some of the practices that DDOs create are focused on enabling that kind of trusting community. You know, many of them call them home, a trusted community of people that I can be growing with. And for that, then they implement certain things. For example, we have what we call a change integration protocol. And change integration is basically like a Kanban board, you know, like where you have the columns where you move cards from beginning to end, like has a certain geometry to it. And the beginning of that is anybody can detect an awareness of a change that needs to happen, or an inkling, something that needs to be changed. And I'm gonna give a silly example. Let's say there's ants in the sofa. And what do we do about ants in the sofa? And people come and say, do we have this change that needs to happen? So this is the awareness. What are proposals? And everybody comes out with proposals. And some will say, well, I think that we should stop eating in the sofa. And somebody will say, well, I think that we shouldn't have a sofa. And somebody will say, you know, there would be several proposals, and then people would agree on the proposal that makes the most sense to them. Let's not eat in the sofa. And then that card would move into practicing. And so now you went from an awareness to a proposal to a practice. And then we'll practice that for a month. And then we'll come together and we'll say, hey, did it work? Well, no, there's still ants in the sofa and people are still eating in the sofa. Okay, so let's go back and move that card back. What is a new proposal? Well, the new proposal is we should have a little sign that we can put on top of the sofa that says, remember not to eat in the sofa. Okay, let's do that. Let's try that. So we move it back to practice. And if we succeed, we just master that. So that's a very simple one, like a very simple example, but it could be other things like people are not doing their cleaning job, or, so things that are practical in nature that require that kind of awareness of change, or people are not giving feedback to each other, or, so there's a lot of highly diverse things that can be infinitely small, like there's ants in the sofa, to incredibly big and transformative. Like, for example, there's tension and there's gossip. What do we do about that? And then to be able to start seeing the elephants in the room, it's an opportunity to actually name when there is elephants in the room and welcome everybody in a circle to be able to put proposals together, versus management saying, okay, children, now we're gonna do this. You actually treat people as adults with good ideas that can take responsibility for their own awarenesses to change and proposals and practice and mastery, and help them with that. What I was talking about was the practices, but I want to take now like a wider look into how do you actually bring people into the company, and what moves us, and how that connects us to a bigger purpose. So, in Unified Field Corporation, we have a big mission. Our mission is to regenerate the soils of Earth through a product that we have. So people connect to the mission, but first of all, they connect to what we call the core activation. They connect to the mission and the values and the principles of the company. And the way that we're seeing, or I'm seeing, the evolution of organizational life is through the creation of social organisms, meaning living systems. Part of that is the paradigm shift from organizations as machines to organizations as living systems, as part of nature. And if we see them that way, and then we bring the principles of life in, like, abundance and generosity and collaboration and creativity. And, those are principles that you can embed within the corporate culture. You can say, these are our principles, and many people like them. They feel attracted to those principles. And yet you need to be able to then help them see how generosity is going to be expressed through the company. And not only see, but model it, model it and embody it within what we called in Unified Field, like a culture, a business, a culture of oneness, or business oneness-based culture. And in oneness-based culture, there isn't that, polarity. There isn't that fighting. You can see it. You see the yin, you see the yang, but there's not it's a yes and, not a but a yes and. You want to be able to welcome the opposite and feel the middle grounds. And that's not only within the corporate with employees, but it also happens within providers or investors, or, so that you have a way to create win-win situations. And not always is the same, because predators are predators, and there's still people that would come to try to, eat you. It happens, right? It happens all the time, investors included in the old way of investing. But to welcome them, to be able to feel good about what they're bringing, and at the same time, like, be seen and be held within what feels good for them, what feels like something that they want to contribute. And you and I were speaking a little while before the recording about emotion and how to welcome feelings. And so in this one of the aspects that I feel that the metaphor, I see that the metaphor breaks in seeing organizations as living systems, is that living systems do not have egos and identities and, belief systems and biases. And so that is something that is very unique to humans. So we need to include them. We must include feelings and a way to help mobilize those emotions, that energy that comes when somebody has a feeling that is either constraining their behavior or expanding their behavior, because feelings are not negative per se. It's just a feeling, and help them metabolize it, help them steer it in a way that then brings them to a better place where then they can act from that better place. And within the context of organizational life, we see that happen all the time. And so we see how people can we invite them to bring the whole self. We don't invite them to just crash the vessel and bring drama, but we do invite them to feel free to make mistakes. So making mistake is not an issue. What is an issue is to make a mistake and not see it, not get feedback on it, not address it, and keep making that mistake over and over again. That is not okay. There is, boundaries within that, because then you're not evolving. If you are keeping making a mistake, that means that's an edge for you, and you're not seeing exactly how to address that edge, but you need to be supported within that. So let me give you some examples, and not only from Unified Field, but from the DDOs that we know the most about. And this is Bridgewater, and Bridgewater was created by a man. It's a hedge fund. It's an international hedge fund, and it was created by a man named Ray Dalio. And in Bridgewater, one of the most important things is radical truth. Imagine that in times like these, radical truth. And they have several practices that I really appreciate. For example, they have an issues log. And the issues log is a log where people write mistakes now that they done or that they see. So in a DDO, there's not a meritocracy of ideas. The basic principle or the basic practice is feedback. And so anybody in any level of the organization can give feedback to the CEO. The janitor can give feedback to the CEO. There is no meritocracy on ideas or feedback. And for that, they have the issues log. So anybody can log something that they see, or a mistake that's been made, or a perception of something that can be a gap, or, so that the whole organization is aware. And that makes people at first very uncomfortable, because they feel that, oh my God, I'm going to be shamed. I'm going to be blamed. Oh my God, I'm going to be, seen in this mistake, and I want to hide it. And you can't hide it. You should not hide it, because we can address it together. And so through the issues log, not only do they have an account of the things that didn't work, so that they can, but they also have an account of the things that they did to address that issue or to address that problem. So they fulfill the transparency, at the same time, the transparency that creates that, what we call in collective intelligence, holopticism, the capacity for the parts to see the whole, because we want that, and wider sense making. So to enable everybody to make sense of what's going on in the larger organism. And that is primordial, because we won't get collective intelligence if we don't have a way in which in all levels of the organization, people can get their senses in and perceive what's going on. So we need all kinds of signaling systems. So the issues log is one of those kind of signaling systems that is really important in the life of Bridgewater. They also have in the Curian, which is another DDO, they have the practice of Huddles. And the huddles are kind of peer-to-peer coaching, where people give support, they support each other in evolving in a certain competence. So they do focus their metrics on competence or KPIs on productivity and performance, but they also have KPIs on what we call cultural participation. So participation in culture is as important as the work that you do for performance and productivity. That fits like an essential component of a DDO. And they have different ways on every DDO has a different way to do that and different practices. But in the huddle one, you're supposed to help each other in being accountable, in keeping each other in self-accountability, but also in helping you be accountable to the whole organization and to yourself and your development edge. And then, they do the huddles, people communicate with their peer, and then once a month, they communicate in a circle, in a bigger circle of 5, which is 2 huddles and a coach. And then they do a review, an evaluation review on how that coaching went, what they evolved, what were their own measures of success, what happened, how did they move, right? So if you think about, in individual development, you want to be able to see how minds and hearts move. If you think about culture participation, you want to think about behaviors. You want to think about, the ways in which we help each other, and the ways in which we keep the practices of the culture alive, how we help and support, how we create that trust within the collective. If you think about individual external metrics, then you think about performance. How did an individual do in their own job? And then that collection of individual performances can drive us to the metrics of productivity. How did that affect productivity? And so that you have the whole integral system on seeing all the metrics. And part of what, in Unified Field we believe about metrics is that you need to have not only objective metrics like, how did you rate your performance? From 1 to 5, 1 being horrible, 5 being excellent. I really was way better than the next month. But also subjective. So having an individual journaling, how do I do? What did you think were your blockages? What were your most, your impediments? What were your best mistakes even? All the way to interpersonal, where a peer evaluates me from that third person perspective, and also objective metrics that go to spreadsheets. And then we can have all sorts of data aggregation that can give us a snapshot of the collective. In Bridgewater, for example, they have what they call the dot collector. And the dot collector is very interesting because it's a practice of constantly rating others. And every rating is like a little dot in your profile. And so, you are collecting dots, as to say. And in dot collection, it could be things like, for example, everybody has an iPad and we're in a meeting and everybody's speaking, and they have like this grid where they have the people, and then they have the people that are present and the people that are present, but in the Y and X axis. And then let's say that I rate you, so we meet here. I rate you on things like, what was your capacity for analysis? How was your listening? How did, things that are pretty practical in the go while we're in the meeting. So they're pretty sophisticated in terms of what they do. Oh, one thing that is always an edge for people in what Bridgewater does, and I'm really thinking about implementing it in UFC, is every meeting is recorded. And so that might feel like it's a lot. Yet, if we are in a meeting and we're speaking about, Tom, then we go out and we say, hey, Tom, we just finished this meeting and we spoke about you. Here's the recording. So one of the primordial, skeletons of this is that they avoid gossip at all costs. If you're going to say something about someone, you will tell them that feedback directly, you will not either gossip or partake in any gossip. Gossip is like the poison of culture. And so you either create a culture of feedback, and for that, one of the main things that I would recommend every organization to do is to get in as part of their practices feedback. Because if you think back again into living systems have incredibly sophisticated ways of providing feedback, right? Think trees and how they interact with the mycelia, and where there's a sophisticated like feedback system where they know where the resources should go, what is a virus that is in there that is going to hurt the trees, or what is the compounds that are part of the system. I mean, it's very sophisticated. Superorganisms have very sophisticated feedback systems. It's part of what makes a system alive. What is the flow? It shows us the flow. It shows us the relationship in between objects and the interiority of a system. And most of us are not taught in school or through life how to give good feedback. So most of us really suck at it. And we don't even know how to either give or receive the feedback. So it's very important to even give feedback about the feedback. We call it digestibility index, like how much did you were able to digest the feedback that I gave you. And so it's a constant learning on being able to communicate with efficiency, but yet with honesty, with radical honesty, but also inviting vulnerability. So both of these things, vulnerability and courage, they really go together. It takes a lot of courage. I've seen it with when new people come and it's their first feedback session. It's like I had an associate, an employee that was terrified of feedback. He was literally terrified. And so what we gave him to do is to get feedback from every single person of the organization on how he was doing in regards to his performance. He was terrified. He really did not want to do it. He rather quit than do that, but he did. He gathered his strength. He went and he gathered feedback from every person of the organization. And when he came back to me, he said he was shining, because he was expecting to be destroyed or hurt or shamed, but he wasn't. And he did learn a lot of things of what he was doing that was detrimental to the team, to their team members, and to the company. He did get his good doses of truth, but he also got acknowledgments. He also got gratitude. He also got his opportunity to name and create a beautiful and potent field of trust with his fellow peers. And I can guarantee you that person grew. He grew that day. And then, we don't have to see feedback as a terrible thing, but as something that is a way for life to tell us how we're doing. That practical mirror that then allows me to be able to navigate reality, because we're more intimate with it. I'm not assuming what you think about me. I'm actually asking you. The reason why I chose to do, me and the CEO of Unified Field Corporation decided to move towards becoming a DDO, and I cannot claim we're already one, but we're becoming a DDO. And why we took why we made that decision is because we do believe that everybody we must live in a developmental society, a society that contributes to the development of human beings. And this is a time of big complexity. Many of people in the organizational contexts understand the VUCA world, the volatility and uncertainty and complexity and ambiguity of the times that we're living, where things are constantly changing. And it's not only within the organization, the organism, but the context outside of the organism, because we live in a world, we live in a nation, we live in a country, we live in a set of in an industry, and things are rapidly changing, and we need to become resilient and adaptive. And we found that and we want to scale. Unified Field Corporation is going to become an international company all over the world, and with the mandate of scaling. We cannot do that with control systems. We cannot do that in the old world. We know that the old world, the old ways of doing organization is not going to scale. You're either going to change or you're going to disappear. You need to adapt, and you need to be highly resistant and trusting on people. And self-accountability and accountability are one of the most important aspects of any organization that not only wants to scale, but wants to evolve and become stronger. In the current, for example, they have different industries. They started with cinema, and then they moved into real estate. It took them like less than half a year to start into a new industry. That's how fast it can become when you enable people to grow, when you trust that individuals want to. I haven't met yet any individual that does not want to grow and be supported in that growth, even as terrified as they might be to step in the fire. The fire is a fire that transforms, is a fire of the phoenix. So if we want to be able to succeed as a society, as a whole society, we need to be inspired in our own evolution. We want to be able to create with the constant knowing that our peers got us, that we are holding each other accountable, and that we are holding each other in our best self. As Otto Charmer says, you are in all given moments, you are two people, the present one and the one that you will become in the future. So that's a question that I ask everybody that's listening to this program is like, do you want to be supported in your own evolution? How would it be to work in a company that really wants to see you, that doesn't want to change you, but that wants to invite you to grow so that you can be stronger, adaptive, resilient, more of yourself, that doesn't want to cookie cut you, that wants you to become your uniqueness, but that in that uniqueness that you glow, so that you're able to pursue not only your best career and the best salary, but that you're actually growing in the level of consciousness, that you're actually being able to encompass more of reality, that we can face everything, not only within the company, but that also translates into your other relationships, the relationships with your family, the relationships with your communities, with your friends, and that we'll help each other. Because that's a basis of collective intelligence. A better me and a better you will definitely equal a better us. Thank you for inviting me.